Darren, how about you? How do you reflect on those decisions at the leadership level a year later, having so much time to think about it? I know that you choose to look and be so proud of your son, saying 170,000 individuals, both Afghans, Americans, citizens from other countries, quoting you, they were able to get them out through that gate and make their lives better. Hopefully they're in a better place other than the home they left. Your final thoughts?
You know, I'll echo Kelly's sentiments as well. I'm infuriated that up to this point, no responsibility, no accountability has been taken for let's face it, the botched way that this occurred. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Our granddaughter could have taken a crayon and a piece of paper and done a heck of a lot better job than three generals with, and I'm spitballing here, but combined 90 years or so of experience. They couldn't have done any better. Our kids, those Marines, the Army, they were all put in an untenable situation through the administration, through the State Department, and there's no excuse for it. There's none whatsoever. And we've gotten nothing. We've gotten nothing out of the people in charge. And it's so frustrating and infuriating. And there's no words for me at this point to explain how upset I am that we lost all of those precious souls. Do we know that they sign up for that? Yeah, we do, that is a possibility. But when it happens in an evacuation time, and to have it happen in the manner that it did, there's no words.
Our hearts break with you, and as Americans, we grieve with you. Thank you for coming on and telling your story.
He sounds like he's been invited to afternoon tea at one of our houses. I will consider it. I'll consider it, only if it's oversight, because what I experienced was personal attacks. I will go if it's true. F you, Dr. Fauci. You don't get to say whether you go. You get a congressional subpoena, you show up, or you get the Steve Bannon treatment.
Protocols, I refer you to them. They have their own specific protocols as well. So they're two different things. They're two different things.
But how is it two different things? Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like we actually no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not. It's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
Exactly what's happening. Thousands of people are walking in a day. Some of them turn themselves over. Some of them are caught. Tens of thousands a week are not. That is what is happening.
So, let me just lay out what we have done under this administration. We have installed new border technology and set up joint protocols with Mexico and Guatemala to catch more human traffickers. We have already made over 3,000 arrests in the first 3 months of launching an unprecedented anti-smuggling campaign with regional partners. We've secured record levels of funding for the Department of Homeland Security.
When Jen Psaki said these vaccines are approved by the FDA, which is the gold standard, that was a lie. They weren't approved. This was not true. They had an emergency use authorization. They weren't approved. But she was a propagandist. I mean, when she's working for the White House, she's this person that, answers questions, and most of it, the hard questions were all by Peter Doocy on Fox News. He was like the only guy that was like pushing back against her, and she just fucking flat out lied on not just one occasion, multiple occasions. I mean, maybe they had a narrative that they told her. Maybe these are talking points. Maybe that's her job. But it's a weird job in the beginning, right, to begin with, because it's a job where you're not even asking the president. You're asking this White House press secretary.
Yeah.
So there's a person, and the only one that was good at that girl, McEnany, what's her name? Kayleigh McEnany. the one who worked for Trump, that lady was a fucking assassin. That lady had like binders with like footnotes, and anyone would say some shit. That's interesting because actually CNN said this, and then she would like quote it back to them and stuff it in their face. That lady's the best ever at that job. She's the fucking Michael Jordan of White House press secretaries. She's a fucking wizard.
So here, once again, are the words from Ashley Biden's diary. Quote, "I've always been boy crazy," she wrote, "hypersexualized at a young age. I remember somewhat being sexualized with a family member. I remember having sex with friends at a young age. Showers with my dad, probably not appropriate." So Ashley Biden wrote this in the context of her struggle with sexual compulsiveness in later life. And she attributes those compulsions to the fact that her father took showers with her in a way that was, quote, not appropriate.
Who specifically is footing the bill for student loan forgiveness? We haven't gotten a concrete answer from the administration yet.
Well, let's start with this. First of all, a lot of the same people who are criticizing what we rightly did in following through on a commitment that we made to forgive student loan debt are the same people who voted for a tax cut for the richest Americans. So when we look at who is benefiting from this, 90% of the people who are going to benefit from student loan forgiveness make under $75,000 a year. And that debt has been the reason that they're unable to start a family, buy a home, and pursue their piece of the American dream.
Let's bring in someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Joining me now is Harvard Law School professor emeritus and Newsmax analyst and the author of the book, The Price of Principle, Alan Dershowitz. Professor, I don't, as you know, have a law degree. I do watch a lot of Law and Order. I don't understand how anybody who's been to law school, like this gentleman considers himself some kind of expert, could say, why is he still not in jail? He hasn't even been charged with a crime.
Well, you think that's a problem? How about Professor Lawrence Tribe, who taught constitutional law at Harvard for 50 years, who says that Donald Trump should be in jail for attempting to murder Pence? Probably the dumbest statement any law professor has ever made. It's part of the Get Trump movement, which is the new McCarthyism. The old McCarthyism, in order to get communists, you could do anything. You could trash the Constitution, violate the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. That's what the Get Trump people are all about. That's what MSNBC is about. That's what the New York Times is about. That's what CNN is about. The ends justify the means. Look, I have read every word, every unredacted word of the affidavit, and I come to several conclusions. One, there was probable cause based on the allegations in the affidavit. Two, the warrant was far too broad. It didn't limit itself with specificity the way the Fourth Amendment says it should. Three, there's no justification whatsoever for having issued a search warrant. There's nothing in the unredacted portions of the affidavit which suggests any urgency. They could have gotten a search warrant 4 months ago. They could have acted on the search warrant the minute they got it. Instead, they waited 2 days. And then the fourth thing is, although technically there is probably enough in there to indict for a violation of classified material or a violation of some of the other provisions involving the archives, no reasonable prosecutor would indict a not only former president, but a future presidential candidate based on these technical violations. I think it was a South American dictator who once said, "For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law." And that's what these people are trying to do, apply the law to him. For there to be a criminal investigation even, but certainly a criminal indictment, it has to satisfy two tests. One I call the Richard Nixon test and the other the Hillary Clinton test. The Richard Nixon test is there has to be bipartisan support. You don't have a Democratic attorney general going after a Republican candidate for president unless it's so overwhelming that Republicans join, as they did with Richard Nixon. And second, you have to justify why is this case different from the Hillary Clinton case. So unless those two standards are met, there should not be an indictment, even though there is technically probably enough to have indicted Hillary Clinton and to have indicted Donald Trump. It's as easy to get an indictment as somebody once said to indict a ham sandwich. So that shouldn't be the standard.
So, you know, you brought up the Hillary Clinton standard, and I remember when Comey gave that infamous press conference, and he said that he didn't think anyone would ever prosecute it. A lot of folks on the left keep saying, well, this is a very different case than Hillary Clinton, even though she had stuff on that secret server that I would assume is a lot more vulnerable to attack. But from a legal standpoint, is there any difference between what Hillary Clinton did and Donald Trump, pro or con?
Well, there probably are, because we haven't seen the whole redacted affidavit. There may well be. But remember, Hillary Clinton not only had material on her home server, it ended up on Anthony Weiner's computer. And again, we don't know what was on that computer, but it was far more vulnerable than anything that was in Mar-a-Lago. So I think if there is going to be an indictment, the Attorney General has to justify the difference between that case, this case, between Sandy Berger, where there was a plea and a slap on the wrist financial fine. So it should be very difficult to indict a future presidential candidate who is running against your incumbent who appointed you. That has to achieve an extremely high standard if the American public is going to accept it. If there were an indictment today based on what's in that affidavit, the unredacted portions of the affidavit, it would just divide the country even more than it's divided today.
So I want to get to this thing, this special master issue. Trump requested a special master to independently oversee the documents. And on Saturday, a district court judge signaled that she was likely to appoint one and gave the Department of Justice a deadline of tomorrow to file a more in-depth inventory of what they took. But today, the Department of Justice came out saying, well, it already reviewed the documents and identified only a, quote, limited set that might potentially deal with attorney-client privilege. Can you explain, A, what that means, and B, what having a special master would do to this?
What this means, the Justice Department says, trust us, we're the government. We've looked it over and we don't find this privilege. Trust us, we're the government. And they claim what they do is they divide prosecutors into two groups. One, the taint team, which will never, under any circumstances, tell the prosecution team, even with an wink or a nod. And as a defense attorney, I think I speak for many defense attorneys, we don't trust that. We don't trust the Justice Department to monitor itself. Who will guard the guardians? An independent master is much, much better, not part of the prosecution team. The material never gets to the prosecutor if this master, she or he, the last one that was appointed was a former judge, a woman, and she went through everything in the Cohen case. That's the way it should go. The Justice Department can't be trusted. That's as simple as that. To do an independent analysis. Remember, it's an ex parte analysis. The other side doesn't get to say a word. So the independent analysis should be done by an independent monitor. Trump is right in this regard.
So you think that he will get a special master?
I hope so. I think so. This judge seems to be inclined, but, you know, maybe the Justice Department will persuade her. They haven't persuaded me based on what they said today, but tomorrow.
And then who chooses the special master? Who would choose that special master?
The judge. The judge will choose the master, and it's usually a former judge. It could be a former justice of the Supreme Court, David Souter. It could be Steve Breyer. Could be a former judge, a former president of a university or dean of a law school, somebody who has no connection with the prosecutors in the current Justice Department. That's the essential point, a complete separation between the prosecutors.
So he thinks, Trump thinks that benefits him, right?
Well, I don't know if it'll benefit him or not. It depends on what's in the material, but the process is the right. The process is an independent, objective one, rather than one part of the Justice Department making decisions for the other part of the Justice Department. Of course, they're going to lean over backwards to help their fellow prosecutors who they have lunch with every day.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I have read a lot of reports, including one in the New York Times, that say the following. Mr. Trump is going into the battle over the documents with a hastily assembled team, that meaning his legal team. The legal arguments put forth by his team sometimes strike lawyers not involved in the case as more about setting a political narrative than about dealing with the possibility of a federal prosecution. Some of the Trump lawyers' efforts have also appeared ineffective or misdirected. Is that the media trying to create a narrative to undermine his team, or do you share concerns about the caliber of his legal team?
I share concerns. Look, I'm not going to second guess a lawyer. There are some very good lawyers. I can tell you that 6 lawyers so far have called me and have said, we will not defend Trump, even though we'd like to, because of what happened to you, Alan Dershowitz, because you have been canceled. You can't speak at various places. You can't speak in your own library. People won't speak to you. People are furious at you. I had a lawyer say to me, I just don't want to be Dershowitz. I've become a verb. And there was a deliberate attempt to try to cancel me because I defended President Trump in order to send a message, and it's been successful, to other lawyers not to go near the case. It's pure McCarthyism of the left, and it should not be tolerated or accepted. That's why I wrote my book, The Price of Principle. I want to explain to people what a heavy price you have to pay for being a principled constitutional lawyer who doesn't support Trump politically, and I want to give people the ammunition to fight back against cancellation. That's what I try to do in my book, The Price of Principle.
Well, as always, it's a great read, and your legal insight is invaluable. So buy the book. It's cheaper than a Harvard education. Professor Dershowitz, good to see you.
Thank you so much.
No one who is alive today had ever experienced a true pandemic. And I'm hoping that now that this is over, people are going to, recognize that some serious errors were made and not repeat those. That's the best you can get out of it.
So what do you tell those people?
Vote Republican. That's what a lot of them are going to do anyway.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, more than 1 million people transferred over to the Republican Party, I think, in 2021 alone. Find out what that number is. But, you look at guys like Ron DeSantis, who kept Florida open and had some pretty reasonable policies in terms of, like, what to do about COVID. And, he mapped it out on television. He was, widely criticized for this, where he was saying, like, we need to protect our elders. We need to, make sure that medical care is available for those people. And everyone else, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. Protect your freedom.
For decades, to do the work that has been about America's leadership in terms of space exploration. And today is very much on that path, about showing the great work that happens here with these exceptional public servants, these exceptional, skilled professionals who have the ability to see what is possible and what has never been done before. How exciting is that?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
If I can just interject for a moment, my deceased son, Bo, he was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And what he used to do is go down on the east side, what's called the Bucket, highest crime rate in the country. There's a place where I was the only white guy that worked as a lifeguard down in that area, on the east side. And you can always tell where the best basketball in the state is and the best basketball in the city is. It's where everybody shows up.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
They're not unlimited. Right now, you can't go out and buy an automatic weapon. You can't go out and buy a cannon. And for those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe, if you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking. Think about this. Think about the rationale that's used to provide this, and who they shooting at. Shooting at these guys behind me.
Last week, Joe Biden said at a midterms fundraiser that MAGA Republicans are semi-fascist. Well, Karine Jean-Pierre, the lovely and beautiful White House press secretary, the greatest example of how affirmative action is a total and complete failure, was asked about this comment, and she, of course, doubled down in support of Joe Biden's remarks. Watch.
On the semi-fascism comment, is this something we're going to hear more of, that phrase? Is it something the president's going to kind of embrace? Or is there any sense that it was, a little impromptu and it's going to turn into a kind of basket of deplorables thing that he regrets and tries to be quiet about?
Look, I was very clear when laying out and defining what MAGA Republicans have done, and you look at the definition of fascism, and you think about what they're doing in attacking our democracy, what they're doing in taking away our freedoms, wanting to take away our rights, our voting rights. I mean, that is what that is. It is very clear, and that's why he made that that powerful speech.
Oh,
she's a moron.
Man, when I think of Joe Biden making speeches, I always think powerful.
Yeah.
That's like the _1 adjective that I like to use is powerful, because, woo, boy, can he speak at all. I just want to set the record straight here, give some perspective. The definition of fascism is a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator, a capitalist economy subject to stringent governmental controls, violent suppression of the opposition, and typically a policy of belligerent nationalism and racism. Now, I can't think of anything that describes the left, actually, better than all of these, parts of the definition.
Look at what they're doing just in the simple fact of labeling.
Right.
People who are, quote, Trump supporters or anybody with a conservative value system or political philosophy. The labeling thing, that's step one, right? Identifying, labeling, then they categorize you, they put you in the box, they shelve you away until they need to deal with you, whatever way they want to deal with you. That, most people just do that. We all do that to some degree. Most of us, we just ignore that person. That's not what their plan is. I mean, when you start looking at, arming 87,000 IRS agents, you start looking at, the government shutdowns we saw during the, quote, pandemic, all these various things that they've shown their hand on what they're willing to do. The cancellation stuff, you've lived through that in Hollywood. I mean, we all have effectively, I've done it with live shows, effectively been canceled. All of this stuff that they're doing, they have nefarious purposes for what they're doing with these labels because, and again, yes, to answer that reporter's question, we are going to hear it more and more and more and more, just like Joe Biden tweeting, or whoever tweets for him yesterday, saying what the MAGA supporters have underestimated is the women in America. They're going to keep throwing this thing out there, and MAGA, Trump, conservative, small government, all the buzzwords are all going to mean fascism very soon.
I want them to go back to ultra MAGA. I really liked that one.
This week, the world got a frightening insight into what happens when you unleash the president without notes, an auto cue, or someone screaming instructions in his ear. You get this nonsensical word salad.
Tell me how you do that. I understand it. I mean, it's clear in its face. You're accurate. But how, in making the case of the freedom men have, what do you do other than to sort of embarrass men into getting into the argument and voting the right way on this issue?
Okay, we also saw President Joe Biden deliver this rousing and totally coherent message to rally the troops for the midterms.
If we elect 2 more senators, we keep the House and Democrats, we're going to get a lot of unfinished business we're going to get done.
Just in case you missed that, he said if we elect 2 more senators, we keep the House and Democrats, we're going to get a lot of unfinished business, we're going to get done, okay? I mean, just like Australia, the senators in the US tend to sit in the Senate. Someone should perhaps tell the president that. And someone should probably also tell the president that handing over $500 billion, with a T, trillion dollars to college graduates who haven't paid off their student debts is utterly reckless, regressive and inflationary. It will take money from the less privileged who don't have college degrees and the responsible who paid off their debts and give it to households earning up to US $250,000. That's 360,000 Australian dollars. When the president was asked about this, he gave this peculiar response.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses to see why these guys get all the tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
What now? Is it fair to people who do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses? One can understand why the president's handlers insist on heavily scripting his appearances and don't allow him to freely answer questions with the press. Look what happens in this clip. It's quite sad, really. President Biden picks a journalist to ask a question before realising he's not allowed to do that. He says, and I quote, "I took control. I shouldn't do that. I'm not allowed to do that." And then the handlers come in and call an end to proceedings. Have a look.
Where everybody thought anything would go.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry. I took control. I shouldn't do that.
No
I'm not allowed to do that. Go ahead. You
I
tell
think
me.
we're going to go ahead and have the rest of the conversation closed press. So thank you all so much.
It's reasonable to ask at this stage just who is running the country, President Biden or the people who grant him the permission to speak.
It's been a long time. I should have left you without a little soul to step to. Me go all the weak song just let through. Time's up. I'm here to raise it up to another level with the bass and the drum. Melodic MC, I'm on the rhyme rebel. Going up the ground, recruiting my staff. Better sit down, cause you don't know the half. I'm making it the whole. I'm fully in control, but the step up in me. I'm bringing the rain. So refreshing, there's no guessing. Who should you pick for this hip-hop question? Never dictating, truly democratic for those who are breaking the status. Furthermore, I must proceed. Always giving what you need. Let's go. Just wait and see for me to blow your mind. Give me a chance to run it down the line. Always know you're in the place to be. Just wait and see. Excuse me for this vocal announcement. Grab whatever you need to get down with. A drink that's leaving the station. You're wasting time with your implementation. You're facing an unruly crowd that wants something new. Lights, camera, action, they want satisfaction. Quote the music that's filling their ear. Making resolutions the first of the year. I bring promises infinitely kept. Made the championship proud and I won't sweat. Always bringing you something different. Never fall in line with the buzz of the time. Innovate, reevaluate those pros and cons. These folks are lost and we extinguish. I'm making it happen. Come on, party people, keep your ears snapping. Just wait and see for me to blow your mind. Give me a chance to run. So run it down the line. Always know you're in the place. This is a part right here, y'all. Third verse is the kill. Just wait and see. A manifestation comes from this. Seal it up in the lyrical scroll. Then the mix is a verbal rendition. The soul patrol gives a seal of approval. Taking its toll. I'm giving you an alternative to live. Moving in between the seams is a stick. Dose from coast to coast. France to Japan. I must withstand. In the perceived notions. My adrenaline flows so sweet like sugar and cinnamon. Now the pendulum swinging in my favor. Must take advantage of the causes of damage. This damage is truly beneficial. Forcing this community to be individual. Now let's get back to the heart of the matter. Get swayed to this. Come on. Just wait and see for me to blow your mind. Give me a chance to run it down the line. Always know you're in the place to be. Let me breathe just wait and see. We've got it going on to the break of dawn. You got to wait and see. Yes, just wait and see. Thank you.
If I said it, I meant it. Bite my tongue for no one, for no one.